And I would add to that, she's also teaching Elijah, my son, Latin through Zoom. Her book on teaching Latin is used in MAT programs. She's edited over 7 Latin texts and has given lectures and workshops about the classical world, really all over New England. Ruth was president and is now the treasurer of the Classical Association of New England. She was the president and is now the secretary of the Rhode Island Jewish Historical Association and the Rhode Island Jewish Museum, which is a work in progress. More recently, Ruth has become a community organizer, which is not a surprise to those of us who've known her. She's president of the Observatory Neighborhood Association, that's her neighborhood, and the recording secretary of the Friends of the Rochambeau Library. In her spare time, she spoils her cats, she sews for the family, and she sews for neighborhood groups. She donated over 1,000 masks, face masks during COVID, and reads voraciously, and she adds, mostly junk. And well, I will simply just say those are your words, not mine. I believe that Star Trek novels are not junk, Mom. One of the things that I observed from my mother over the years of living with her and the years that she was my Latin teacher was how to bring a profound love of your subject to those to whom you're presenting. And what Mom does is just lets that joy and that thrill of intellectual exploration shine out into everything she does. And that's part of what makes her such a magnetic personality and part of what makes it such a delight to study from and with her. So in just a few moments, we'll turn the floor over to you. And oh, wow, I see relatives and friends from Providence joining us too, which is really a delight. The format of this evening is going to be a roughly 30-minute presentation. And Ruth has prepared slides and a whole artistic presentation to go along with her lecture. Following the presentation itself, we'll then switch over to Q&A portion of the evening. We're going to keep everyone muted just so that it's easy for everyone to hear. If you have questions that you'd like to bring to her at the end of the presentation, you can put them right into the group chat window. You can chat me privately and I'll moderate the Q&A at the end. And it would be easiest if you would submit your questions just as you come up with them. And that way I can group similar questions if many people have similar questions that they'd like to bring to her. And it is truly a pleasure and a delight to have Ruth Breindel with us tonight presenting on the Synagogue of Dura, Europos. And as we begin, I'd just like to say this is a holy moment to have my community and my family here together. And I'm going to share the blessing for Torah study, giving thanks to the one who commands us to immerse ourselves in holy words, in words of Torah. So please feel free to join me if you're familiar with this blessing. We really declare that this is a sacred moment. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Mom, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sweetie. And yes, it was very exciting to have Josh in my Latin class for 4 years. You will notice he is still alive. Even when he would raise his hand in the middle of class and say, what are we having for supper? So first, let me thank Beth Shine and Iris Silva for organizing this. And second, my great thanks to my friend Bobby Houlihan, who listened to as my trial audience. That was truly a noble endeavor. One of the fascinating things about the ancient world is how interpretations differ over time. When I first began working with Dura Europos, it was still standing and excavations were going on. Pictures on the walls of the synagogue were read in the context of rabbinic interpretation and for the romantic mythologies of the area. Today, Dura Europos is no more. Rabbinic interpretation is out, and the mythologies are no longer deemed important. Instead, the effect of the neighboring populations and the history of the region are paramount. The only thing that remained constant through all this is the murals of the synagogue. And now I'm going to bring up And here we go. And would you go away, please? Come on, come on, shoo, shoo. You know how annoying it is when you can't see because this thing is in the way? Thank you. Here we go. Thank you. One must always talk to the inanimate, even though the inanimate is incredibly stupid. So I call this talk the Synagogue at Dura Europos, Birth, Death, Rediscovery, Annihilation, because that is what has happened. Here you can see where Dura Europos was placed, on the Euphrates River. It was built high up on a mound in a bend in the river. The only way it could be attacked was from the west. It was on various trade routes. You can see the Euphrates, and this is what it looked like when the excavation started. The history of Dura Europos. Around 300 BC, Dura was founded by Seleucus Nicator as a fortress. He was one of Alexander's companions, and he took over this part of Alexander's conquest and founded the Seleucid Empire. Europos is the name of the city that Seleucus came from, and the Dura means fortress. Almost 200 years later, Dura changes hands. The Romans come and invade, but they don't last very long. As you can see, Dura changes hands again, and the Romans return, as they usually do. Somewhere in here, the synagogue is built and first expanded. Due to a lack of written records, there's no absolute date of when this happened or when the first Jews arrived. We do know this date, as it is on dedicatory tiles in the synagogue. The end of Dura Europos, 256 to 257 CE. The city was then destroyed by the Sassanids and abandoned. Covered by the desert, it remained undiscovered until the 1920s. In the 1930s, excavation was begun, and it lasted until 2015. Professor Lariche excavated there for 25 years. In 2016, he explained what happened to the site. I quote, "The site is now destroyed and nothing can be done about it now. And some of our workers and one of our guards has been beheaded." To explain all of this, here's, whoops, that was too quick. To explain all of this, don't look, here is information from the Jewish Telegraphic Agency in 2016. Fortunately, the wall paintings were safely removed from the site long before ISIS destroyed the place of worship. Tiles can be seen in the Museum of Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and the walls themselves are on full reconstructed display at the National Museum of Damascus, but we don't recommend going there. However, there are also reconstructions at Yale University. What makes this synagogue so special is that it is the only one of this period in this area with magnificent murals extant, so to speak. The building itself can resonate with us today, as it started out as a house, was enlarged into the synagogue, and then enlarged again. The murals were refreshed and painted over in places as styles changed. The ceiling tiles are also impressive and not often seen in other synagogues. Only recently has work been done on them. One interesting point among many is that there were no written records at the synagogue, no scrolls, papers, or papyri. Only outside did archaeologists find one with part of the Birkat Hamazon, the prayer after meals, on it. There are many versions of photos of pictures of the murals, and they do not all have the same color. This is due to when the pictures were taken, lighting, and other variables which I, who can't take a decent picture of anything, have no knowledge of. So let's visit the city first. Here is the city plan. Note that the synagogue is against the west wall, right near other buildings. It is only, and see how the city is laid out in that lovely block area? Doesn't it look like New York City, Central Park in the middle? Okay, sorry about that. The synagogue is only 2 blocks from the gate. This is the main gate on the west. Right next to it here in L5 is a temple to Adonis. This shows the multicultural aspect of the city. There were peoples from Rome, Greece, Syria, Parthia, Palmyra, and everywhere in between. They all had their own religious buildings, Jews, Christians, followers of Roman and Greek gods, Mithras worshippers, and even Manichaeans. They seem to have lived in relative harmony. The destruction of the city came from outside, not from the inside. The actual sanctuary is at the back of the synagogue, with meeting rooms in front. The entrance is through the alleyway on the right. The synagogue is surrounded by private houses. One theory is that in this way, the synagogue was hidden from the rest of the city, and therefore the Jews were safe from persecution. There is no proof of this either way, because again, there are no written records. On the other hand, the private houses could have been part of the Jewish community so that people would be closer to worship. This is the private house size. It might have been built between 165 and 200 CE, while the Romans were in charge of Dura. The building, in its 2 largest rooms, held about 60 people. The view is that this was not a wealthy community at the time of its founding. In 244 to 5, the old building was destroyed and a new one erected. We know these dates because of those dedicatory ceiling tiles. This is the synagogue we are dealing with, whose murals are so fascinating. The community seemed to grow in wealth, and the Roman rule was now, God bless the Tsar and keep him far from us. Here you can see how much larger the new building is. Quote, these included rooms for Jewish officials and visitors, public dining halls, and a kitchen, as well as what may have been spaces used for education. In other words, it was obviously a vibrant and active center of Jewish life at Dura. This slide imagines what the buildings would have looked like with the flat roofs. We can now enter the building. Carl Kraling was one of the archaeologists who first worked at Dura Europos. His books about the various buildings are considered the gold standard. He developed the numbering system that you see here for the various pictures. The next 3 slides come from an article by Teresa Rejak, and I think this makes the pictures easier to understand. The south wall. In this schematic, you can see what is pictured on each wall. So we have maybe Elijah with a question mark. We have the sacrifice of the priests of Baal, and then the sacrifice of Elijah on Carmel. And he will continue around to the western wall. And above him, we have the ark in procession. This area here, where there's nothing, shows you where the wall was damaged. This is the best part, the western wall. So Elijah, as you can see, comes right to here where he's reviving the widow of Zarephath's baby. Then we get Esther's triumph. And notice here we have the Aron Kodesh, Samuel anointing David, and Pharaoh's daughter with the baby Moses, which is absolutely fascinating, and we're going to see next week. Absolutely amazing. Up here we have Miriam's well, Aaron and the consecration of tabernacle. So that means that the two of them get a little bit of time. Abraham, Jacob's blessing, Moses, Ezra, we don't know. There's a closed temple, a captured ark, and the temple of Dagon. And then at the top, Moses, David. We know this is Moses and the burning bush, and we definitely know this is Moses and the crossing of the Red Sea. However, there is so much confusion about these parts here. Many were damaged, and the part above the ark was very overpainted. Note in addition, please, that there are two panels about women, Esther and Pharaoh's daughter on the bottom, not to mention Miriam's well, but she does not appear in this picture. One scholar says, to the left of the Torah niche, the scenes are concerned overwhelmingly with the actions of the righteous in maintaining the covenant with God, while to the right, the action takes place in a largely pagan context. All I can tell you is this is how people make their living and get tenure. Here we have the northern wall. Again, a question about a damaged picture. Down here we have Ezekiel's vision of the dry bones and the battle of Ebenezer. Note that the battle where the Philistines had defeated Samuel is on the western wall over here, and then continues around to this wall, reading from the left to the right, where Samuel is victorious at Ebenezer. The next slides are all of the pictures on the walls. I wanted to get you a panoramic picture, as in the first slide, but there wasn't one. After this overview, we will look at some pictures more closely. So here is the Western Wall, and it is pretty freaking amazing. All of the pictures that we are going to see are reconstructions, and almost all of them come from the Damascus Museum. Here you see the West Wall and part of the North Wall. You can see some of the ceiling tiles up there on the ceiling, and notice how the paintings have been damaged here. Here is the West Wall and part of the South Wall. That South Wall is in really bad shape. The ceiling tiles are very evident here. Now, we're going to see if this works. This is a very short video clip of a reconstruction of the West Wall in Israel at the Museum of the Jewish People at Beit Hatfuset. I am not using audio because the man who did it gives improper information. I don't want you to have bad information. So let's see if this is going to work. My God, a miracle happened. I think. Hello?
Not seeing anything yet.
There we go. Okay, and we're going to move up to about 25.
We can't see anything, Mom. It's
all
we can see is the link.
Right. I have to stop sharing.
As I said, from a small city called Dura, which 1,700 years ago was said to be the two largest empires of the time. Jerome and Hellenistic
Okay, it's talking. We don't listen to anything he says. But what I want you to see is how tall it is. It's absolutely amazing how tall it is. Do you see? It's like up to the ceiling. And here's a big guy. And you can really see how they've repainted it. So the colors all look like something. That's not the way it really looks. Okay? But I just wanted you to see the size of it, because I think it's really fascinating to see that. Okay, so let's see if we can get back again. Share. Okay, you get out of here. I'm going to go back to from current slide. Okay, there we go. So that was just because I wanted you to see it's hard to tell sometimes when you're looking at pictures like that how absolutely tall this is. It was the whole wall. So Here is the photograph from the first excavation of the Aron Kodesh. And you can see parts missing, and you can see the picture here, but they paint these, it's taken in black and white, so you don't really see the color, which is what makes it so interesting. Ta-da! This is the central part of the Western Wall. The top panel, which we'll talk about in a minute, was painted over, and scholars are not sure what was actually there at first or what is actually there now. Here we go. This is the top of the Aron Kodesh. 3 objects stand out here. A menorah on the left with the lulav and esrog, a tabernacle in the center, and an animal down here, perhaps a lion, and a man on the right. This man might be Abraham, and here is the binding of Isaac. Or it might not be. Is he then going into a tent? And why is there that tree there? Some think it could be a tree of life, and others disagree. The Romans made niches in their houses for their gods, the Lares and Penates. Note the similarities between this and the decoration on the Aron Kodesh. First, they both have columns holding up the top of the structure. Second, they both have space for the sacred object. And third, they each have illustrations of things important to their people. For the Jews, the menorah and the temple. For the Romans, their gods and snake, a sign of immortality, since snakes shed their skin and still live. According to Wikipedia, which everyone uses, but no one admits to, quote, the branches are often artistically depicted as semicircular, but Rashi, according to some contemporary readings, and Maimonides, according to his son Abraham, held that they were straight. All other Jewish authorities, both classical, Philo and Josephus, and medieval, Ibn Ezra, who express an opinion on the subject, states the arms were round. Archaeological evidence, including depictions by artists who had seen the menorah, indicate that they were not straight, but show them as rounded, either semicircular or elliptical. Chabad has taken the straight version for its menorah. However, in this picture, which is at Dura Europos, there is the curved menorah. As Rabbi Josh would say, go figure. Here is the picture over the ark. Can you tell what's in this picture? The deterioration as soon as it was open to the air and the painting over by later artists has made this very difficult to understand. See if it looks better in black and white. When something is in such bad condition, the way is open for many interpretations. The best part is no one knows the correct answer. Scholars have no idea what the table with the objects on the left are, but they are probably of ritual significance, a phrase used when they are guessing. It could also be the showbread, which we will talk about at another time, which was placed on the altar at all times and on that table. Some believe that there are 2 lions on the right. In this second version, based on Goethe, who was the artist in the first excavation, he thought that that tree was growing out of a pot. And notice, we don't have the bread anymore, but we have almost a moon shape here, which is very bizarre, very bizarre. So could this be a vine? Could the Jews be the fruit of the tree? At top left, a man with a Phrygian cap is holding a lyre. While at first he was thought to be an Orpheus figure, that is now largely discounted, and scholars would like to make him David, though why he's wearing that cap is a mystery. Could it be the influence of the Sasanians and Persians? There are also the two more lions down here. And this scene up here is sometimes thought to be Jacob blessing his 12 sons. Aha! Reconstruction of the top painting. You can only figure that out with this. However, look at this next slide. On the left, it seems that the dying Jacob again blesses his 12 sons. And on the right, he blesses his grandsons Ephraim and Manasseh with their father Joseph watching. So if you take a look on the right-hand side here, where you can see the picture, notice they're drawing the people so that you can see what's happening. So with parts of the tree removed, you can see the musician better and what looks like a monkey and a lion listening to the music. Some believe that this is a messianic scene. The musician charms wild animals and brings peace. No explanation of the rest of this right-hand part could be found. This shows the Elijah portion circled. It's on the lowest register, so it's very easy for people to see. Here is the first part of the story. The story comes from 1 Kings 16 to 18. Ahab, the king, had set up an altar to Baal. Elijah comes and tells him to get rid of it. In addition, he says, "Now therefore send and gather to me all Israel unto Mount Carmel, and the prophets of Baal 450, and the prophets of the groves 400, which eat at Jezebel's table." This is done. And when Elijah challenges the Israelites, saying, "He is the true prophet of God," no one jumps up and agrees. Thus, Elijah sets up a contest, which is very normal in the ancient world. He tells the people to get 2 bullocks, cut them up, and put them on 2 different altars. They do so, then the priests of Baal are to light a fire just by calling on their God. They do so all day, but no fire springs forth. See this little into here? This little person is a folk legend. Here is his story. The priests undermined the altar, and Hiel hid himself under it with the purpose of igniting a fire at the mention of the word Baal, but God sent a serpent to kill him. One scholar says, these elements are not what the community would have heard read out from scripture, which points to an independent sermonizing practice. Their presence further suggests that these paintings are visual references to midrash-like oral expositions. So in the picture, Hiel is small as he has to fit under the altar. The 8 priests represent the 450 priests. That would be too many people for the picture, not to mention the other 400. Note that the robes alternate between white and color. What is the significance? Beats me. In addition, their right arms, since they have no power, are pointing downward. Now, this is the fire that Elijah controls. After repairing the altar, which had been torn down, Elijah poured 4 buckets of water over the wood and the bullock 3 times. There's a lot of magic in those numbers. And water ran into the trench he had dug there also. Elijah then prayed to God, and the fire came and dried up the water and cooked the offering. Finally, Elijah gathered all the priests of Baal and killed them. Here, Elijah and his followers, perhaps Elisha and another person, have their right hands up to praise God. In addition, according to one view, the altar is made up of 12 stones for the 12 tribes. And here again, you can see another part of the Elijah circle. He's right here on the left. There are many interesting features in this mural of the Elijah cycle. The scene is of Elijah reviving the son of the widow of Zarephath, described in 1 Kings 17. First, you read it from left to right, not in Hebrew or Aramaic word order. This is probably because the picture therefore points you toward the center where the ark is. You read it like a comic strip, as opposed to the other Elijah scene, which is composed of 3 distinct pictures. Here, first, the mother brings the dead baby to Elijah. The mother is looking at Elijah, not at the audience, which is quite different from the others in the picture. Elijah has his name written in Aramaic on him, so you will know he is Elijah, not his disciple Elisha, who has a similar story in 2 Kings 4, 32 to 37. I think they are probably the same person, and that is a duplicate story, but that is for a different talk. One scholar notes that Elijah is reclining on the couch, and this pose resembles local relief sculpture. It is an especially Roman pose. In addition, the hand of God motif appears in the upper right-hand corner, as in many of the pictures. While holding the baby, who is now alive and a more healthy color, Elijah looks straight at the audience. The final portion of the strip shows the mother holding the healthy child, and now she is looking at the audience. Instead of wearing a black garment as a sign of mourning, as she did in the beginning, she is now in color and looking out at us. Elijah's garments remind me of a toga, which would make sense in a multicultural world under Roman rule. Beyond this story and its happy ending, there are 2 amazing pieces of graffiti on the picture. Unfortunately, due to the state of the picture, we can't see them very well, but it says in Persian over Elijah's foot, right there, when Hormizd the scribe came and he looked at this picture, living the child who has been dead. And if you think that's English, you could join my students in the way they translate it. Another inscription reads, the month Ardwahist, day Hormizd, when Ardor the scribe came and he looked at this picture and he looked at this child, living the dead become. Another inscription, this one in Parthian and painted above Elijah's right thigh, looks at the idea of resurrection. Praise to the gods, praise, since life eternally has been given. Perhaps he says gods as meaning Elohim, or maybe it is his own gods he is praising. Since these comments are in foreign tongues, it is obvious that there were visitors to the synagogue. In addition, they felt compelled to leave their comments behind for everyone to read. Things haven't changed much over the centuries. To put it on a higher plane, one scholar says, graffiti on the Elijah and Ezekiel panels are deeply theological, serving to mediate, intensify, and in some cases almost ritualize the experience of viewing these panels. This is a good time to discuss the nature of the pictures: didactic, entertaining, explanatory. Some scholars believe that as the man giving the sermon spoke, he would point to the various pictures. Others see it as explanatory for those who are not literate. That way, they could still learn the story, much as the Christian stained glass windows in the Middle Ages taught their people the stories. As for entertainment, well, the pictures are certainly more interesting than a blank wall. One scholar traces these pictures to the Manichaeans, who had picture books showing various stories. They were brought all over this geographic area and were well known. She states the following, that both of these displayed a visual library of doctrinal subjects. That is, they captured in pictorial form a large sample of core tenets, which were also recorded in the respective sacred texts of these religions. They fulfilled primarily a didactic function. That is, their pictorial genres, narrative scenes, didactic portraits, and diagrams in the Manichaean case played a dominantly instructional role. And finally, they effectively supplemented oral instruction. That is, the paintings were sermonized about and discussed in light of living interpretations. At the time of her paper, no surviving pictures of the Book of Mani, which was the Manichaeans' Bible, were extant. However, archaeologists have found some fragments since. I would add that we know there were Persians traveling around here. After all, they left their graffiti on Elijah and also on inscriptions on the ceiling tiles. Surprising evidence has appeared that, like the Manichaeans, the Jews of Dura welcomed converts, quote, and even accepted them into high positions, which is demonstrated by the frequently overlooked fact that one of the three leaders of this community is explicitly called the proselyte. Written in Aramaic, this ceiling tile states, this house was built in the year 556, which is the second year of Philip, Caesar, in the eldership of Samuel, the priest, son of Yediah the Archon. Those who stood as patrons of this work were Avram the treasurer, Samuel, son of Saphra, and Arshak the proselyte. The date, 556, refers to the founding of Dura Europos, and that's a very common way to date things, is by the founding of a city. This inscription includes Jews with biblical names, notice Samuel twice, and Avram, a naming practice common in both Jewish communities of the Roman Empire, in both Palestine and diaspora communities, and those of the Sasanian Empire, that is Talmudic Babylon. The scholar goes on to note, the most significant donor, Samuel the priest and archon, is called in a Greek text presbyter of the Jews. Now it's actually Samuel of the Jewish presbytos, or Samuel presbytos of the Jew. But hey, singular, plural, we're all good here. All these donors appear in other Greek dedicatory inscriptions as well. The fact that Arshak is singled out as a proselyte in our inscriptions suggests that Judaism was attractive to some Persians, even to the point of religious conversion. Arshak appears on two dedicatory inscriptions on ceiling tiles in a rather formal Aramaic as Arshak the proselyte, and once in Greek without a Jewish caste designation as Arsakes. A Greek ceiling tile memorializes the donations by Abram and Arshak, or Arsakes, presumably the same Abram and Arshak in our Aramaic dedicatory inscription, together with a Solomon and a Silas. This suggests perhaps the priority of Aramaic and Greek as the main spoken languages of the benefactors of the synagogue, even as at least one Persian and maybe two were counted among the benefactors to that congregation. However, the ceiling was so high and the writing so small that it would have been difficult to read the names. I just have to move you guys to another part of the forest here. There we go. There were originally 234 ceiling tiles. You saw some of them in the first pictures of the inside of the synagogue. This is a section with women's faces alternating with other pictures, such and the other pictures you're going to see right here. For example, abstract pictures such as rosettes, fruits and vegetables, zodiac or mythological figures. This is the sea goat or Capricorn. And women's faces. We notice there are women's faces, but no men. Some think that since a man's picture might look a little like a real person in the congregation, which would not be allowed, they didn't have them. But since the women are rarely seen, that was okay. On the other hand, the paintings show many men, and they do seem to be stock characters. And the evil eye appears several times, perhaps apotropaic. I hope you enjoyed this very brief history and tour of Dura Europos. Next week, Esther, Moses, David, and friends.
Oh, Yasha Koch. Wow. This is absolutely fascinating. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I was actually there. We have scads of questions. I've been sort of, you're sitting down,
Yes.
and I'm sort of lumping them here together more or less in chronological order from your presentation.
Okay.
What does Europos mean? You explained Dura as fort, and does it have any connection to the word Europe?
Okay, so you know the myth about how Europe got its name, which was Europa, who had been, well, you know how Zeus got around. Anyhow, and so Europa fled, and the area she fled to was called Europe. And so Europos, or Europa sometimes, was a very common name for cities in the ancient Greek and Roman areas and areas they had influence over.
So there are multiple Europi?
Yeah, there, Europi, yes, AE. Remember that the ancient Greeks and the Romans are all dead. So you may pronounce the words any way you like. They are not going to bother you.
I appreciate that. Do we have any sense of what brought the Jews to Dura Europos initially? What were they there to do?
They were probably merchants, and they came there. This, as you can I get the map again? Would that be okay if I brought back our slideshow so we can look at it?
Yeah, whatever you want.
Well, sweetie pie, I need to do the right thing. Okay, so let's just go down to my cute little map. Excuse me, where's my cute little map? Hey. Okay, I think we have to do the slideshow to do this. Get out of the way, please. Okay, so slideshow from the beginning. Okay, from beginning. There we go. So, why did it do that?
I know.
Thank you. Me neither. All right, let's go back up to the beginning. There we go. So, from beginning. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Here's my cute little map. Sorry. So what you can see here is how Dura is right on the road from Babylon and all those wonderful cities. And then you go up this way and you wind up in Syria, or you can wind up, notice Seleucia, and you can then go across to Greece and Rome. So it's on a trade route. It's very interesting. Any of you who know about the Silk Road, this is something similar in that stuff would come from one far end and travel to the other. And it would take a freaking long time till it got there. So I would say there were probably merchants.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That would make sense just from the bit that I know about that history. Okay, thank you. Why don't you can leave the map up, you can clear up whatever you like.
Okay.
Let's see. Do we have any sense of what form of Judaism was observed there? Are these people who are going to follow rabbinic Judaism? Are there Christian influences? And would this have anything to do with their ability to justify having images, which struck a lot of people as really, really strange. And quite a few people would like to know more about how do you justify having images in a Jewish house of worship?
Okay, let me deal with the image part first. And this information comes from our very good friend, Morris the Rabbi, who Morris I met at City College in New York, these 50 years ago, 52 years ago, 53 years ago. Anyhow, I've known Morris forever. And he's a real scholar. And what he says is, and it is very true, is that synagogues in Europe had pictures all over the walls. And this was very common, not just birds and, flowers, but scenes of pictures. And it was in America when those things no longer happened. So we who have grown up in America with our synagogues, we don't put those pictures there, but those pictures were there. In a way, it's like the Greek statues. You remember how they talk about how these Greek and Roman statues are so pure and they're white, but they weren't. They were painted. They were completely painted. And in fact, there's this wonderful one of a Trojan archer wearing spandex with colors and stripes and all sorts of things. So our view is not really what was going on there. As to the pictures on the temple, this is I think that the reason that they did it was to teach. I really do. I think it was there to show people and to teach them what's going on. Remember, they didn't have books. The only scrolls that people would probably have would be the Torah in the temple. They wouldn't have time for that kind of thing. So the pictures were there to remind you of what was going on. And we don't know what the other pictures were because they've been destroyed. And we will never know because the whole thing has been destroyed.
Do we have any sense of their spiritual life? Do we know how much they were affected by Christianity or by pagan practices around them?
No, we do not have a single clue because there are no written records. And that's kind of a shocker if you think about it, that there are no written records. Now, is it because when the Sasanians came through and destroyed everything and carted everybody who was still alive off as slaves, they burned everything or they took everything? Is it because they disintegrated over the course of centuries as the sands came and covered it over? We don't know.
And speaking personally, I'm surprised that they didn't find a Geniza there or any kind of textual reliquary. But,
nope.
Really. Still with just the physical nature of the synagogue, is its location any kind of indication of prominence? Someone noted it was near the gate. Does that make it a higher rent neighborhood, a lower rent neighborhood? It's near other temples. Were there, in fact, neighborhoods where there would be houses of worship? So a whole bunch of questions on a similar theme there.
Okay, let's take a guide. So what I'm going to try and do. Yes, they still have it. Then it was closed. A friend told me that I had seen the Yale exhibit. I, of course, I do not travel, have not seen it, but I understand that it's very impressive. Let me get back to the city. Oh, I did it. And then a miracle happened.
Yes.
Okay, let me get back to the city. Yes. Here. Okay, so here you have the map of the city. And what you can see is, for example, temple. Excuse me, I take my glasses off and crawl onto the screen. Temple of Zeus, private house, temple of Zeus, private house. So it's pretty much scattered willy-nilly. We toss this here, we toss this there. Now remember that when they first, well, you couldn't remember because I haven't told you, but when they first discovered the temple, they thought it was a Christian temple because it had all the pictures on the wall. Then when they found the Aron Kodesh, they were like, oops, sorry, I guess it is a Jewish synagogue. Sorry about that. But you'll notice that the temples and the houses and the buildings all crammed together. It's like a city. It's a city. It's a real city. Maybe more of a city than Providence, but yes, it's a real city.
They just sort of filled in where they were.
Yeah, and I think being along this wall here, they're pointing towards Jerusalem. So it makes sense to put them on the western wall. That was close to the gate, I don't know, but that certainly was not a good thing when they would be conquered all the time.
The question was just posted, what do we estimate the population of Dura Europos to have been?
Do not have a clue.
Fair enough.
Sorry.
There was someone who had a hand raised with a cell phone connection, I think Gil and Gail.
Oh yeah, it's muted.
So Mom, why don't you remove take away the screen share. So Gil and Gail, or Michael, whoever's there with the cell phone.
Yeah, sorry. I was just wondering, one quick question is, now I'm looking at the western wall mural, just above the Aron Kodesh, we know that one of the more famous pictures is just to the right is what is assumed to be Ezra holding the Torah. But then to the left of that panel is this big red blur. It's not exactly clear. But then to the left of that is another guy who is just standing there. Do we know who he is?
May I bring that picture back up, Josh?
Yeah, go by all means.
Okay, let me share that with you. And I'll be going into that actually in more detail next week. But the pictures like here, they think that maybe it was Moses or Ezra, and maybe this is Abraham over here. But there are some people who think that all four of these are Moses. And we'll put them in the Moses camp, as opposed to others who want to think of them as other people. But you'll notice Moses gets a lot of play here. We've got him with his, when he's born. We've got Miriam and Aaron. We've got this huge crossing of the Red Sea. We've got him with the burning bush. And we know it's him with the burning bush. Excuse me. We know that it is he with the burning bush because there's a sign that says Moses. Mm-hmm. So some of them are very obvious, but these unfortunately do not have cute little name tags on them.
Well, do we know anything about the big red panel between them?
I mean, the one where that's supposed to be Jacob, maybe, and David on top, maybe? That was the mushy part. That was the part here that it's very hard to tell what is actually going on. And that's what's very frustrating.
It looks like it bleeds into the panel right on top of that, and then that from that top panel to the left, it looks like it's just a mountain, but it's not clear what it is.
Exactly. And what has happened here is over the course of time, people have painted over it. To give you a modern perspective on that, my grandma, when she was 67, started to paint in oils. And she refused to buy decent canvases because she didn't think she was very good. So she would buy these really cheap board canvases and paint, and then she would paint over them. And then she'd turn them over and paint on the back of them. And I think that's what we're having here, that as styles changed, people, the new artists came in and they painted it this way. And then somebody said, well, you know what? I think we should have a picture of so-and-so and I'll give you X amount of money. Oh, okay. Wipe, paint new picture over it. And so over the course of time, and especially when this was opened up to the air and the deterioration, the pictures got all smushed together.
Okay.
So it's hard to tell, very hard to tell.
Michael, that's a great question. And I appreciate your answer there, because that feeds into another couple of questions that were paired here. Can you share more about the reconstruction and the restoration at the synagogue itself, as well as there was some confusion about what if the pictures that we saw were reconstructions or just displays that weren't actually in the synagogue itself. So could you share a little more about that in our closing moments together?
Okay, any colored picture is a reconstruction. Anything in black and white was done at the moment when they opened it up and they found what they had there.
So it's really faded. And so real color photographs there in the synagogue just aren't possible.
Not possible at all. And of course, now that it's totally been destroyed, it's not ever possible. So what we have here only are the pictures that they drew and that then other people took and did in color and put in the museums. So we're at quite a distance from what was done originally. And there's a lot of interpretation here.
As I like to quote you, it depends who's up for a doctoral thesis that year.
That's right. That's right. And so we don't know. For example, when you look at this, Orpheus or David. Why are there birds here? How did that monkey come in? Where is that monkey coming from? What are you people doing with a monkey in the middle of this? You know, I mean, please. So you've got a lot of interpretation going on here. A lot of them have little names, thank you people, but a lot of them don't.
Mm-hmm. And there's no record of any of this having been taken from the synagogue in private collections, anything like that, as sometimes occurs.
No, because they didn't find it till the 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
And the excavation didn't start till the 1930s. So no, so this it was what it was.
Fascinating. Could you remove the screen share for a moment, please? I'm just going to flip over into gallery view. If anyone has questions that have not yet appeared in the chat window, just raise your hand, send up a flare, something like that to get my attention. I'll call on you and you can ask. I'm trying, as always, to be mindful of our time with Zoom, given that we said it was going to be an hour, and I know people get fatigued. Any questions? Anyone who's not yet had the opportunity to ask or hasn't written yet over into the chat? Oh, what are you going to be presenting on next week?
Aha. So next week is going to be so cool. I'm so excited about next week. And I might have to leave out a piece because it got too long. I'm on this website called academia.edu. I put some of my articles up, and so they keep sending me articles, and it's like, wait a minute, would you just stop? I need to stop. I don't need any more articles about Dura Europos. No, you need to have this article. So it's going to be about Esther, Moses, David, and if we have time, some of their friends.
Still all art from Dura Europos.
It's going to be the most of it is going to be that Western Wall.
Beautiful.
I'll do a very quick recap of the history in case somebody missed this brilliance. And then you see, yeah, there are loads of pictures. I stole pictures from everywhere. If it's on the internet, by God, it's free. But I did write down on the bottom of each slide exactly where I stole it from. And I want you to know that I read over 40 articles for this. And when you get to the point where the articles are starting to quote each other, you know you don't have to read anymore.
To quote the great Tom Lehrer, pleased to call it research.
That's right.
Michael, do you have a short follow-up question to close out our evening together?
No. I was just wondering if you were going to put up any links to the slideshow, or is it like
So beyond my abilities.
Oh, so Michael, are you asking if she would make the slideshow available to us for private viewing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Great. So yeah, I'll coordinate with you, and we'll.
Is this just like a regular PowerPoint, or?
Yeah, it's just a PowerPoint.
Great.
Okay, so can you just put it up on the FL site, or?
Yeah,
This
well, I'll talk to you, Mom, and we'll figure out a way to host that. Good question, Mike.
This
Okay,
is why one has sons, so they can do it.
Daughters, I imagine, could do it as well.
I don't know. I only have sons.
Probably
All right,
Eliana
thank you
could
so
do
much.
it easier than I could. Ira, is there
Thanks,
anything that
Ivana.
you'd like to share to close out the evening, or shall I?
I just wanted to say it was a wonderful talk, and only rivaled and perhaps exceeded by the mother-son show that followed it. So thank you. Both of you. And we hope to see all of you back next week, same time, 7:30 for part 2. And I really appreciate Ruth, your
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I really love doing this kind of stuff.
It was a delight to have you, an absolute pleasure to have you. And thank you to everyone, to Ira, to Beth, to everyone who worked behind the scenes to make this really wonderful teaching possible. And I'm looking forward to next week as you continue the story. Check out the webpage. We have so much going on. Just in the lead up to Purim, and then throughout Purim itself. The Scotch tasting, of course, is going to be this Saturday, and Shabbat Rinah is going to be Friday night. So lots to delight and lots of joy to take in the community. And if you're new to Bethel, we'd love for you to continue to be connected to us. So pop us an email, give a call. Let my mother know if you're from the Providence contingent and you'd like to get on our Friends at Bethel mailing list. We'd be happy to add you. And thank you so very much for bringing such delight and such light to a fascinating topic. I knew nothing about this. Wow, what an evening. Thank you so very much. And thank you one and all for joining us. Be well, Lela Tov, stay warm, stay dry.
Thank you.
Okay. Pax bonum.